Hi, I mentioned already that I'm working on basically a set of potential opportunities for the GitLab Kubernetes agent and our Kubernetes integration in general. And I would like to share with you what I was doing here, primarily to ask for feedback. Right now, the issues are not linked at the beginning, but I will soon link them. So you will be able to navigate from this spreadsheet to the specific issue, but the issue does not contain much information at this point. So you shouldn't accept for the first one. So let's get started. As I said, these are kind of possibilities to be added to the roadmap type of topics. Some of them are already on the roadmap, but even there, the prioritization is still an open question. And you can see what I was doing here and how I proceeded. First, I present all the teams, as I call them, and then I will go for each team in its specific aspects. Bear in mind, it will be a long video, so take your time and feel free to speed up the playback if it helps you keep the focus here. So, basic CI tunnel. We know this. The only question is, why do I call it basic? We have 4 levels of CI tunnel discussions. One is when the CI tunnel uses the service account of the agent. This is what I call basic. The others are when we use the user impersonation or job impersonation, or we have group level CI tunnel as well. And this is the basic setup that I want to ship first. This is as well an ordered list, and the ordering is done by this column. So feel free to discuss that ordering as well. Based on my current understanding, second, I would focus our efforts on pruning of resources. This, I think, in order to be a good cloud native citizen, a nice player in our users' clusters, we have to clean up after ourselves. So if something is removed from the manifest repo, we should get rid of those resources and synchronize, in this respect, the state of the manifest repository. In terms of Moscow principles, this is the only must-have item on this list. So that's how much I think it's a crucial one, central one. The following item on the list is review app support. I'm thinking here a lot about pull-based versus push-based, because if my understanding is correct, we will get the push-based review app support automatically with the CI tunnel. And at the same time, I see a lot of value in the pull-based setup. And that's why I'm thinking that what could we add there? At the same time, I'm not sure that it is that valuable for review apps, because one could say that for dev cluster, I don't mind pushing code there if it's secure. So we can use the CI tunnel, but for the production clusters and staging, where the review apps don't matter, there I want pull-based deployment. So that's the review app support. At least add support on the push-based setup. That's the idea. User-based kubectl generation. By this, I mean that the user should be able to retrieve a kubectl that impersonates him, and he can use from his local desktop. Basically, a story that I've heard a few weeks ago, this is pretty common, just it was the most recent example, is that some people are moving away from GitLab's Kubernetes integration, the certificate-based one, because developers were regularly copying the certificate details from the setup page of the cluster and using those tokens for the personal troubleshooting scenarios, even though every developer had a personal account as well. They just didn't know how to use those. So this is something that I think if we add the kubectl generation at the user level, that provides a lot of features out of the box, because from that, developers who know how to use kubectl can automatically start using a connected cluster, use Prometheus in the cluster, or anything else that's there. The next item on the list is automatic labeling. I think this is a really nice feature to support better troubleshooting and monitoring and all these scenarios without us developing any UI, without us developing any integrations. We just provide the labels on the resources that we manage. Next one is the user-based CI tunnel. This is related to the user-based kubectl generation, I think, because both require user impersonation, but this would add it to the CI tunnel and would connect it with the CI. And as you can see, I consider more important to have the local kubectl runs than the CI-based user impersonation one. The next item is to expose selected in-cluster resources behind a GitLab OAuth proxy. This might be totally new to all of you because I came up with this idea as I put together this list, and I was thinking more and more about various possibilities we have here. We have been thinking a lot around proxying various Kubernetes services through GitLab. In a sense, it's related to that, but instead of us proxying cluster internal service, we wouldn't proxy. The user would still have to get to that service or set up an ingress around that service. But this is something that we could make it simpler so that we could NGINX and probably all the other ingresses as well have a very nice OAuth 2 support with something called the OAuth 2 proxy. And what if we just make it simple to set up so that you say that this is my Prometheus service, this is where it can be found, and then with a few click of buttons, we provide you the manifest files that you can deploy to your cluster, and everything is set up for you to log in using OAuth into that Prometheus service using an ingress. That's the basic idea here. Map GitLab groups and projects to Kubernetes Airbag. We discussed this a few times. It has an issue called out N and out Z support. The idea is very simple. Often what we see, and we run even a UX research around this, is that the teams are organized in a GitLab group, and the team owns all the projects in that GitLab group. And in the cluster, there's a namespace for that group, and everything, one or more namespaces actually. And everything that's managed by that group is in those namespaces, and only those groups manage those namespaces. Today, the cluster operator still has to set up both the group roles and namespace Airbag roles. What if we could simplify this, that the user is already in GitLab, so we just allow them to use the same roles with some customization, of course, because that's something necessary there, that in these clusters, the developer role can have anything in the namespace, but in this cluster, this production cluster, they can only read the non-secrets, for example, everything else but secrets. So that's the idea here. And yeah, I would love to hear your opinion again. Only following all these comes the very graphical user interface heavy issue. But I think many of these could have graphical interfaces, like the OAuth one, for example. For the GitLab Airbag mapping, there is some UI around that as well. So these things have some UI requirements, not very strong ones. The one in row number 10 is what we have today as environment boards or deployment boards. This is the same with our pool-based approach, with an almost real-time idea on how to do that. Then comes policy integration. We have this today with Polaris. It's actually community contribution, so it's much more ahead on the roadmap because we don't have much work to do with that. But actually, I would position it at this place if it would be up on us. Next one is an image updater. The idea is very simple. If the in-cluster image is outdated compared to registry, then the DRI for that resource should be notified in GitLab using an issue and perhaps an MR that's open. Or if the feature is set up in such a way that, for example, patch releases should be applied automatically, then we should make that a possibility as well in a GitOps style. So this is a tricky part. Following this comes integration with Alert Manager. Today, GitLab offers an Alert Manager integration. You can set it up relatively simply, actually, except if you use the agent. If you use the agent, yes. The idea is that the soon to be removed GitLab Managed Prometheus sets it up kind of automatically, or the manual Prometheus integration allows you to set up a webhook as well that goes back to GitLab. We should allow this with the agent as well. Only following the Alert Manager, I would start thinking about integrating Prometheus. Of course, it might happen that we need some level of integration with Prometheus for the Alert Manager integration to work. This is to be discussed. But from the UI point of view, I think the Alert Manager UI is actually primarily how you set up the alerts, which we can do in the manifest repo. Even today, we don't need a special UI for it yet. Or one can do, and the other part of the UI is the alerts that are surfaced to the user, that are incidents. And this workflow is what we have to support. While on Prometheus, the UI is the metrics view that we have in GitLab. And I think that's much less important from a user's point of view, because if they have the alerts, they can open their Prometheus using the user kubectl, for example, that we had much before, somewhere around here. As a result, or even the OAuth one can have them with that. So that's why we don't need the Prometheus integration, but we do need the Alert Manager integration. The same for integrated log search. That's a great feature set, but users, there's a very well-known workaround. Just use your own Elastic Stack with your own Kibana, and you are done. If we provide you easy access to those tools with a kubectl that sits in that's set up in your local desktop, or an OAuth-based ingress that you can set up easily using our UI, then we don't need to add this log search. On the other hand, the log streaming is a different issue there. You can get it with various tools, even a kubectl setup, but there is much less of work on there. Anyway, it follows the log search because I think it's less valuable than log search is actually. And then we have support of templating tools like Customize, KPT Helm, something around these lines in the manifest repo. I think it's a hugely controversial issue, but we have to figure out some kind of support. I don't know how to do that right. And I'm thinking a lot even to have it before, because I think many people would require it and would be happy to have it. We can even have just documentation on it, like something, use the Helm operator from let's say the VBworks, for example, or something like that. But I think we should be able to come up with a proposal here. And so we just need a proposal. I'm going to schedule it a bit earlier right now as I speak. Let's do it much earlier. Okay, so this was the quick overview. Now let's see what I did. Moscow is a very simple prioritization technique. Must-haves, should-haves, could-haves, won't-haves. These are the names here, and you can see everything was added accordingly. There were a few won't-have items as well, but I did not even add those to this list. If you are interested, I can tell you those. All of those were technology-dependent setups. That's why I decided that we don't want to go that way. Okay, tiering. Today, everything is in premium. At the same time, I try to look at it from pure buyer-based perspective approach, because one of the reasons why I want to keep everything in premium is that we don't know the scope of many of the things we do, and I don't want to get into a situation where we add something to core, but actually that would be in a much better place in premium. We just did not realize what we are developing when we set the tier. As a result, I want us to continue developing targeting premium features, but I see the potential of moving some of these features to core. Clearly, the primary candidate for that is actually the basic CI tunnel, where I even added this as a topic in the issue itself, in the epic itself. I think that's a great candidate for a core feature. And pruning of resources, as it's a must-have item, I would consider it to be a core feature as well, but you at least have to have some kind of support there. Because what are you pruning if you can't even deploy? Anyway, I don't want to focus on that. I would rather focus on the other columns because there are quite a few. These are pretty much kind of problem validation related columns without specific user interviews. So I started this thing last week. Of course, behind the ideas, there are all the user interviews that I was running lately, but there were no user interviews running specifically on these topics except a few. Okay, the problem with the CI tunnel is that basically it's really an adoption issue for us. We want to make it simpler to adopt the GitLab Kubernetes agent for our existing. Let's continue. So the first one is for the platform engineers to make it simple way to adopt the agent without any requirements, any changes in their processes that they have to move to manifest repo or something like that. As a result, from whom do we solve? Existing and new users who are familiar with GitLab CI. How big is this market? I would expect, based on the interviews that I'm running, that 40% of GitLab customers, that are customers, not just users, are actually having some kind of Kubernetes integration today. And this is a great opportunity for all of them to start using the agent. If you think about Terraform, for example, there we clearly know that around 30% of GitLab customers have Terraform code somewhere in their repositories. I think 40% is relatively a little bit ambitious estimate, but relatively strong estimate here. What alternatives are out there? They can use Argo, Flux, or any other insecure push-based approach. And this is really about quick adoption. So I'm not going through the other ideas here. We have the metrics and everything figured out already. Pruning of resources. I think that every Kubernetes user requires us to prune resources once we don't want to manage those resources once it's removed from the manifest repository. As a result, I expect it to be more like 60% of GitLab customers, because this is the market share of Kubernetes, the market penetration of Kubernetes. What I hear mostly, it's put between 60 to 70% that the companies use Kubernetes after a certain size, and that's where we target it. What alternatives are there? There are no alternatives. If you don't prune, they have to figure out something totally different. I've seen once a GitHub project that actually clears the GitHub with the GitLab review app namespaces because we don't do it ourselves. So that's unacceptable in the future. That's why it's a must-have item. Review app support, again, I think this is one of the biggest selling points actually of GitLab, as it comes down to all the beauty of review apps and simplicity of it. We have to support it as well with the agent. And today they have to write custom workflows to support review apps. User-based kube cutter generation. I think that this, once you are a little bit security aware, you have a little bit sizable team, which is pretty likely if you're on Kubernetes, then you want the team members to use their personal tokens to connect to the cluster that identifies them against your cluster, and then it's a requirement. So that's like 40 to 60% of GitLab customers. Support for templating tools. The reason why I'm not super happy to prioritize this is the market size. Actually, I think that there is a relatively large number of users who want it, and if you think that 60% is 100 is all the whole market, then 20% is basically 1/3 of our potential addressable market, which is a lot of people. but at the same time, it's not everyone, and these people have very strong opinions. Like they want to use customize, they want to use HAN. That's what they know how to do, and they don't want to migrate away from it. That's why at least we should come up with some recommendations how to do that. And today the alternatives are argument flags that support it out of the box, or GitLab CI, where you just lose the beauty of the manifest repos and the pool-based approach, which is a problem. Labeling, I think if you are an SRE, you know how to search using the labels. If you are a developer who sometimes have to troubleshoot topics, I'm not sure that you would know how to use the labels. So that's why I don't consider it a very important thing. On the other hand, this is an opportunity for us as well, as we want to focus on application operators to allow them these searches. So alternate labeling is primarily important for people who know how to use labels and how to filter by labels. And they could use their own Prometheus instances that we just exposed to them using the user-based kubectl generated local access, basically. For the CI tunnel, user-based CI tunnel, I think the approach itself is relatively simple, obvious. The question there is whether the CI tunnel is that important, because for production or even staging clusters, users might want to use a pool-based approach, while for dev cluster, do they really care about which user pushes the code out there? That's why I haven't added at a higher level. Here, our value is that every user has a GitLab identity, and we just have to use that. Okay, exposing selected in-cluster resources behind the GitLab OAuth proxy. Today, the only option is that they do it on your own. Set up everything on your own, figure out how to do GitLab OAuth, install the OAuth 2 proxy, and use your ingress annotations in a way to have all of this working together. I think we could simplify a lot of things here, and we could make it even kind of self-serve that, okay, now I need an access to this Prometheus. If you have the necessary authorizations, then we can provide it to you. Mapping the groups, I think this is a huge simplification for many platform teams. And I still want to run a few validation steps around this, but I'm pretty confident about the problem. The question is whether users would expect a solution from us, or they would be reluctant to use our solution and would love to use their own, and what kind of customizations that might be required, because clearly developer cluster is very different from a production cluster. The user interfaces, we know that that's one of the biggest selling points for Argo CD. At the same time, this is not where the value is, because there are lots of dashboards for Kubernetes clusters. So we can even say first that just use the official Kubernetes dashboard with the tools that we have already deployed, and it will show you how the deployments are rolling out. Policy integration, we spoke about it. The only alternative here is the Open Policy Agent, which is a great tool and much more powerful than Policies. Nevertheless, Policy is probably enough for 80% of our users. And as a community contribution, this is something that I want us to support and work with the Fairwinds people here. Image updater. There are a few alternative image updaters, but actually they don't really work well with any SCM tool. They work in very weird ways, as they don't own that part of the process. So I think we have a really strong position here, and we could provide an image updater that is way more powerful and they provides a much better user experience than the others are capable of. Alert manager integration. They can use other alert manager syncs or Zapier or something like that. It would be just a very strong feature for GitLab, I think, if we can make it easy with the agent. Okay, I won't move on with all of these. I've tried to add some preliminary ideas on how to measure the success of these features as well. I mean, whether they are used or not and how we can get more feedback. But instead of measuring success, I would like to have really strong problem and solution validation around these ideas. So we just know that we have done our homework and now success just shows up based on that homework. And it's more about the question of how fast the adoption is rather than if the adoption or not. And often the critical idea is the easy onboarding actually. Okay, so this was my quick review. If you have any feedback, please provide it either during the team meeting or on Slack or in the issues. As I told you, all of the issues will be linked here. So have a nice day.